When you're scrolling through budget speaker options, you'll quickly notice that the cheap ones often sound like they're shouting through a paper cup, tinny highs, thin mids, and a bass that feels more like a polite tap than a real thump. You might get a decent volume, but the music quickly loses its depth, and movies feel like they're missing the low-end rumble that makes explosions feel immersive. That's where the Polk Audio Reserve R600 floor-standing speakers step in and actually give you the full-range sound you've been hoping for without having to shell out for a high-end audiophile system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been using the R600 pair for a few weeks now, and I'll tell you straight up what makes them stand out beyond the usual budget-friendly hype you see every day. First off, the mid-range is surprisingly smooth and detailed. Polk's specialized cone design does a solid job of keeping vocals clear and instrumentals defined, which is a huge win when you're streaming a vocalist like Adele or a jazz trio that relies on subtle interplay. If you've ever gotten frustrated with cheap speakers that sound like they're squealing on the vocal track, the R600's mid-range gives you that natural, warm presence without any harshness. The bass response is another area where these guys shine. Instead of a boomy, uncontrolled low end, the R600 uses an innovative port design that pushes deeper, louder bass while staying tight enough that you still hear the individual drum hits. I tested them with a few of my favorite movie scenes, think the rumble of a space battle in a sci-fi film, and the low frequencies filled the room without turning my living room into a low-frequency swamp. If you enjoy gaming, that same controlled bass helps you feel the impact of a car crash in a racing game while still letting you hear the finer details of the engine's revs. A lot of people think a speaker that looks sleek can't also sound great, but the cabinet construction on the R600 knocks that assumption down. The slim, modern design isn't just for aesthetics, it minimizes cabinet resonance, which means the sound stays focused and doesn't get muddy over time. I placed them against a wall in my home theater setup, and the speakers performed just as well as when I had a small gap behind them. That flexibility is a real plus if you're dealing with a room that's already full of furniture. Speaking of looks, the walnut finish blends nicely with a range of decor styles. If you have a minimalist living space, the clean lines and subtle wood grain add a touch of elegance without screaming for attention. For those who care about matching their gear with their interior, the R600 makes a visual statement that says, "I care about sound, but I also care about my design choices." That's a benefit you don't get with most budget floor standers that tend to be all plastic or cheap veneer. Another practical perk is the speaker's efficiency. Because they're engineered to work well with modest amplifiers, you don't need an over-the-top power amp to drive them. I paired the R600S with a mid-range receiver that I already own, and everything sounded balanced from quiet passages to louder cinematic moments. This means you can get a full-range audio experience without splurging on a high-power amp, which is great for anyone watching their budget. If you're into music streaming, you'll notice the soundstage the R600S create. The speakers manage to deliver a wide, immersive field that makes headphones feel a bit claustrophobic. Imagine listening to a live concert recording, the horns, the crowd, the subtle echo in the hall, all feel placed around you. It's this kind of three-dimensional feel that makes a listening session with vinyl to digital streams feel more alive. Now, no product is perfect, so let's run through a quick pros and cons rundown. The biggest upside is definitely the clarity in the mids and the controlled bass. It makes the speakers feel more like a true hi-fi system than a cheap floor-standing pair. Their design is also a strong point. You get a speaker that looks good in a living room,